Hey guys, it's Barry.
I'm Nate.
It's Brian.
And welcome back to the Collecti-Bros podcast. Today is going to be an awesome podcast episode that I'm excited about. Are you guys excited?
I think we're all excited for
Wow,
this
you
one.
didn't
Kidding,
sound
I'm
excited.
super amped for this one.
Jeez. All right, today we're going into the Is It Worth It series. This is my choice as of my most expensive game. It's Chrono Trigger on the Super Nintendo. Heralded as one of the greatest RPGs of all time. And so we're going to go through 5 topics: story, gameplay, graphics, sound, price, and collectability, and see if this game is worth the price. Now, this game is talked about very, very heavily. If you've never heard of this game, I'd be shocked. If you know about this game, you probably know everything about this game already. So I'm going to try and go a little bit of a different route, because there's so many podcasts out there where they'll sit and talk about Chrono Trigger for hours. So I want to try and get into the more nitty-gritty of the value of this game, rather than, is the game just good? You know, try to take a little bit of a different perspective on it in terms of the game. Not just being a good game, but a valuable game. So Chrono Trigger came out March 11th, 1995 in Japan, and then August 11th in 95 in North America. So we had about a 6-month gap between an Eastern and a Western release. Originally on the Super Nintendo, it also came out on the DS, PS1, and the notable horrible PC port that is also the horrible phone port, which we can talk about a little bit later. This game is a little bit of an anomaly, so it's kind of a joint effort between Squaresoft and Enix at the time, where Squaresoft was known for Final Fantasy, and Enix was known for Dragon Quest. And a game like this won't ever happen again because of the fact that companies don't work like this together. They just don't loan out their people. So this is a combination dream team that will never see anything at the capacity ever again. Some names that are included in this that are a big deal. Directors Takashi Tokita, known for Final Fantasy IV and Live Alive, or Live Alive. I'm not sure how that's pronounced yet. I've heard both.
I've heard both as well, but this is appropriate for this episode because people debate names and pronunciations with all sorts of things.
That's true. Yoshinori Kitase, who is our Final Fantasy dad, probably the big name right now in the Final Fantasy franchise since Sakaguchi has been gone for a while. Designed by Sakaguchi, so the creator of Final Fantasy. Obviously, big name. Let's see. Written by Yuji Horii, who created Dragon Quest, and Masato Kato. And then artists include Akira Toriyama, which everybody knows him for Dragon Ball, artist of Dragon Ball. Also an artist was Tetsuya Takahashi. He went on to create Monolith Soft. Monolith Soft produced Xenosaga and Xenoblade Chronicles after he was able to create his own studio after Xenosaga. Kind of took that with him, and they're all kind of spiritual successors in that way. And then music is by Yasunori Mitsuda and Nobuo Uematsu, which... Now, Uematsu is like, everybody knows his name. He is the music composer for video game industry. Don't know what's going to happen after he passes on. I hope the man lives forever. Like, name me one person that everybody knows in the music industry. It's like the John Williams of games. Is him. So, a lot of big names in this title.
It's like an all-star lineup of every capacity, sound, art, story. It's incredible. It's like if the 3 biggest bands in the world were like, we're making a band, and then some.
It's like how, it's how they take the best players onto an Olympics team and then go take them to battle, but it's like, here's all of the best people from the Olympics
right, it's
mashed into one.
They do it with music. You have super bands all the time, but for it to happen in this medium, it's unheard of.
And I mean, if this group of people, like, we're never going to see, people like Kitase are going to be able to go and make a dream game with somebody from a different studio. They won't let him. They won't let anybody. And that's how the world is built now in terms of contracts and whatnot, is there's not a lot of collaboration anymore. And if it is, it's very, very heavy in red tape and writing. So this kind of freedom that this game was born from is not something that we'll ever see again, which makes it very, very special in its own right. It sold about 2.3 million. It looks like combined worldwide for the Super Nintendo. Probably a lot of digital copies just because of what it is. I'm not sure on the DS, but it's not, surprisingly, it's not a low print low print Super Nintendo game. But it's rare in terms of, I mean, how many do you see? Everybody's holding on to them is the thing.
A lot of bootlegs.
A lot of bootlegs.
Mm-hmm.
I saw somewhere that it sold 2 million in 2 months in Japan.
The information is hard to track.
It is very hard.
Yeah. I mean, for 2 million for a Super Nintendo RPG is a big number.
Right. It's an $80 RPG because it's $80 back then.
Retail.
Well, and I was going to bring that up, actually. Let me, hold on. Let's see. Inflation calculator, because I was actually looking at this. So I went on a quest on the internet to see like what the MSRP prices for a lot of these games, like Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis. A lot of it came from Reddit, from people who were like, I remember it being this price, or people ended up finding ads, like very old magazine ads that had like, hey, this game's coming out and this is the price. Like a NBA Jam was, I remember seeing on an ad.
I know RPGs were always a little more expensive too.
Yeah.
So I remember Phantasy Star was $100 when it came out for Master System.
Wow.
So game cost at the launch year for Super Nintendo was about $50 to $60. And that's US prices. I know in Canada they were a lot more because of some of the import fees and whatnot. The cost of creating a RPG title was more as well. It wasn't like I think, RPG titles are classically known as being more expensive than like a sports game. So a lot of people who remember buying Chrono Trigger the day it came out was like, I paid $100 and that was new. And $100 to us right now is quite a bit of a big number when you think about it. Like, could you imagine, Final Fantasy 16 coming out and like day one for standard edition, it's $100.
Crazy.
And we're at 70, and 70 is actually one of the lowest points it's been in comparison. I mean, if you put into an inflation calculator $100 from 95, it would cost $188 today.
Wow.
So, and it's 1995. That's not even anything older like Nintendo or whatnot. So for this game to be, if it came out today, it would be the equivalent of a $200 game out the gate.
It's a collector's edition now.
So it begs the question, like, I think I have it in the notes, like, what do you guys consider a banger? Like, it was $100 when it came out, and there's $100 games now. So to me, this game, to me, a banger has got to be like the double the price it was when it came out. That it was to me. So I feel like this falls in that classification.
Definitely.
Anyone who has doesn't know the definition of banger, I think Chrono Trigger is going to be a banger for everyone that would even use that phrase. I was also looking up old ads and stuff for it, and I actually found the US commercial for it that appeared at midnight on MTV. Interesting marketing. It was the 90s. Marketing was unique, we'll say, but it was a voiced over Japanese voice, but they had the subtitles in the bottom where it was like, rad experience, Chrono Trigger.
Lose your luggage was the best tagline.
It was just super, it's almost like a dream state where it would show a clip from the game, but then it was this dude trying to sound serious but use radical words on the bottom. It was trippy.
Yeah, that sounds like hey, do you guys remember the Pokemon ones?
Yeah.
Where they come out of the Game Boy onto the school bus? Yeah, yep. The 90s ads are wild.
It definitely didn't fit the tone for the game, but I'm thankful that the game had strong enough legs to stand on where obviously it didn't crumble because of the poor or weird marketing.
I mean, back then, though, we got a lot of our news and a lot of our hype for games through the magazines. I mean, GamePro was huge, EGM. That's where a lot of the hype for this game came from, I remember.
Nintendo Power had multiple classic issues with this issue having spread, hyping this game up, and obviously it lived up to it.
I mean, it was such an all-star time for Squaresoft, especially.
What a run.
They actually, and if I'm remembering this right, I could be wrong, but they were rushing almost to put this game out in time, and so they had to pull people off of the Final Fantasy VI team to come work on Chrono Trigger to get it done. Final Fantasy VI wasn't out yet, and that's the other big Square banger. So the games that came out during that time period were just insane in quality.
What a run.
A peak. It's Squaresoft's peak. Yeah. Before they had a merger, and arguably a peak since. People say that they've never had anything as good as this come out.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's wild to me to think that you've got people who've been working on two of the biggest RPG titles ever on this game, Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI. So it's not a shocker that they're both kind of compared one against the other a lot. the story of this game, it's a pretty basic RPG story, if you think about it. I mean,
classic RPG story.
RPGs classically, you're the hero, you go save the day. Yeah, that's it. Chrono is he's built as a self-insert, so he's a silent protagonist, and Hori, who's the Dragon Quest creator, he, if you've played Dragon Quest games before, none of them speak as far as a protagonist, and his whole thing is like RPG protagonists are supposed to be silent, like they're supposed to be self-insert. So when you play RPGs, the whole idea is like you are the character, so why would we give the character a personality? I argue with that sometimes.
It's weird though, because it makes a lot of sense. Like, it's a role-playing game. You're playing a role, and even this game, like, you can name every character in it.
Sometimes, like, and you look at games where they're not silent, like the comparative Final Fantasy VI that came out at the time. Like, if Terra was silent, what would you have?
Terra is silent, kind of. It's not, but yeah, like it is,
Like, no speaking. So,
right.
And a lot of the times, especially since the character is not speaking, they're very dependent on their sprites and their animations and facial expressions. So Chrono is a silent protagonist. We take his role, and you go to a fair, and your friend has this crazy machine where she's like, hey, I made this machine where we can basically teleport. So you stand on that side, and you're going to teleport and come out the other side. Super cool. And we're talking like this is set in... It's like a medieval type, right. Fantasy medieval age at that point in the game. So you go to a festival that happens, and then this blonde girl is just following you around, trying to figure out what's going on, just wants to have fun, and she ends up following you to the teleporter, and some necklace she has reacts to this teleporter and creates a portal that she gets sucked into. Your friend Luca, she's like, hey, we gotta go in there and save her. And looks at Chrono and is like, Chrono, I knew you'd say the same thing, or something like that. Like, it was very apparent that your character was agreeable and was like, yeah, I'm going to go in and save her. So you both jump in the portal and you go try to find this girl.
Shout out to Luca's dad for being like the most irresponsible parent of all time. Like, sure, I'm let my daughter build this teleporting device and let children walk on it and try it out. Like, oops. And let other kids walk in to go after it. Like, good job, Dad.
Well, not even to mention that they both created the fighting cat mech at the festival where you go fight it for points, and it tries to like kick your ass. So... you go through the teleporter and you pop out in an area, and at first, it's in the woods. So you're walking around trying to figure out what's going on, and then you pop out onto the world map, which prior to that you had. So when you left the house, you left, and there's the overworld, which we don't get overworlds anymore in games. I miss them.
The overworld's great for this game
music,
too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So you pop out, you see the overworld very briefly. It's not like you have to go very far.
Such a tease.
So you pop out and you go up to the festival, you go back inside of an area. So in this one, you start in the woods, and once you pop out in the overworld, you see, this is the same place I was. What is this? It's kind of weird. The tone, the music changes a little bit. There's like mist around the overworld. The colors are slightly different. So when you get back on the overworld and you're talking to all these people, you figure out you're not in 1000 AD anymore, and you're in 600. So we've gone back in time 400 years. And, this girl that's missing, Marl, which that's how I pronounce her name. I think people pronounce it a little differently, but that's what it seems like to me.
That's how we're going to do it for this episode, whether y'all like it or not.
So she is now a princess or a queen, and she's like, why am I here? And in your time period, she is the princess, but in this time period, she is a queen, and this is her ancestor. So they think like, oh, you disappeared. And you're back now, so you need to go back to being a queen. And she's like, I gotta get out of here. So it's a time traveling story in a nutshell. I'm not gonna try and just keep going into detail, but you at one point in time you are trying to escape the castle with her. You finally get her, you escape, and Luca's like, hey, I think I can open a portal up. You open a portal up, but you can't control it. Next thing you know, you're in 2000 AD. So now we've gone from 600 AD to 2000 AD, and this world looks crippled. There's no music, and if it is, it's very like a haunting noise. It's very dark. There's domes everywhere. So this is very clearly an erect apocalyptic future, and there's people inside of these domes, and they look haggard. They look like hobos. They're starved. They're reclusive. They're very scared. And comes to find out that there was a big apocalyptic event that happened in 1999, which, when you think about it, is funny that Chrono Trigger is a Y2K story, if you didn't think about that before, but like Chrono Trigger is the Y2K story that happened. So, the apocalyptic event happened and Marl basically decides like, we can't let this future happen. I'm not going to let this future happen. We're going to go back in time and destroy this like monster thing that destroyed the world before it actually destroys the world. We have this time traveling device. Let's do it. Luke is like, yeah. And silently, like, Chrono is like, yeah. Like, he's just basically being dragged along. Chrono is not the main character almost sometimes. And that's an interesting thing about this game is it's like, he's not the main character, but he is. And there's points in time where you kind of need Chrono in the story, and there's points in time where Chrono isn't even in it. Like, that boy, he's not there.
I think it's weird how the story is driven through the characters, and like each time you go to a different timeline, you get introduced to a new squad mate. I guess that's the right word, teammate.
Party member?
Right, and it almost seems like they're the main character during their zones. So like when, I don't want to get into spoiler territory, like when you meet...
We're going to be spoiling this, so if you don't want spoilers, like go to a different podcast, I suppose.
Right, that's fair.
You had enough time to play Chrono Trigger.
It's been almost 30 years.
To be fair, this is the first time I've played it, so I get it. But so like when you first meet Frog, for example, like his side quests are in that area also. And if you're playing with him in the squad and you're playing with, Chrono in the squad, if you have Chrono and Meryl, is that how we're pronouncing it? Meryl? It's almost like a love story where like then you play with different characters and it could feel really like sad, depressing, moody. It's weird how the story and the narrative's so character driven. There's an overarching story, sure, but the time and place and the zone affects with your squad mates, like the direction of the story, I guess is the best way to put it.
Like any good RPG, like your overarching story is like beat the bad guy. It's the little intimate moments that make it special, like any good RPG.
Right.
It's your companions.
And I think across the board, that is an agreeable point about this game is driven by side characters.
Mm-hmm. And they're great.
So much so that they're almost not even side characters.
Right.
Like your party members are your main characters. Every single one of them is important to the story. Even the one that you may or may not get in your party is integral to the story. So without any of your party members, the story kind of falls through and holes. So you need all of them. Chrono is almost unneeded.
Yeah, he's like the vehicle for delivering the story that's happening around you and designed that way. So.
And this is one of the most interesting games I've ever experienced, especially when it came out, is your main character, you can end the game without it. There's a point in time where Chrono dies, and it's an unsaid choice, but the unsaid choice is to now, if Frog kind of takes over as a leader, naturally, because Frog's awesome.
Frog's
the best. But Frog takes over as the leader, and Marl's devastated about, losing Chrono, because especially if they're in your team when you fight that fight, like the dialogue's very different as well. Both Frog and Marl were in my team when Chrono died, but they're like, we need to figure out how to get Chrono back to life, and there's a quest where you can go on to bring him back. You have to find all of these items, and then, long story short, you can create a new Chrono where you go back in time, replace his body with a puppet, essentially, and then suck him back into the hole and he's alive. But or you can just choose not to, and you can choose to continue the game without bringing Chrono back to life and beat the final boss without Chrono in your team, without any of that happening. So it's so interesting that they create a game where the main character is obsolete at some point. And you can choose that. You don't have to go back after him.
Could you imagine that in other RPGs? Like, could you imagine like Final Fantasy VII without Cloud? Just like, nope, main character doesn't exist.
Well, and that's also the idea. And I think it would hit a little harder too if Chrono had his own personality and that mindset, where he is a silent protagonist and it is kind of a self-insert, and it begs the question, like, do you feel like you are necessary to the story, or is the story more about everybody else? He's not the one who's driving the story forward. Marl's the one who said, we need to go after this, and we all just followed her. Like, well, I didn't make that decision to follow that plot.
Right.
The side characters did. And this whole story really is about the side characters and showing them off.
They're also well thought out and unique. There's classic RPG tropes, but none of them feel like they're just there to fit the trope. They all have fleshed out personalities, fleshed out moral compasses, reasons. Artistic design on them alone's insanely impressive.
I was going to say, even the animations, like, they're so expressive, and you get so much of the personality through, like, their facial expressions, the way they fight, the way they walk around the overworld. Like, there's so much character and uniqueness to every single sprite.
And in the story, we keep going back to the characters because that's really what the story is about, to be honest. Like, Magus and Frog's relationship is just such a rich story that this game wouldn't be the same without it. And Luca and her father's story would not be the same without it. And Luca and Robo and their relationship, like there's, especially once you break open that point in the game where you can go after the side characters' quests and learn more about them. Like they give that opportunity to you, that choice where it's like, do you want to learn more about these people, or you can just keep going with no, you just end the game. You can end the game whenever you want to in this, and that's what's so interesting about it. It's more in gameplay, but
I think another interesting thing with the story is like not even just the side characters, but even the bosses. They all feel so like crucial to like that part of the game or that part of the world. Like every boss encounter is like built up to like, this dude's a badass, you're gonna have to go fight him. Like, get ready for it. And by the time you actually get to the fight, you have so much story invested into it. Right? This is a big deal. This isn't just, oh, giant rat or something. Every boss feels like, oh crap, like I've been leading up to this, let's go.
I mean, to bounce off of that boss point, like midway through the game, interestingly enough, like the first half of the game, they're like, we need to go fight Magus, which I say Magus, some people say Magus, and I think that's weird.
We're doing Magus.
It's Magus.
Whether y'all like it or not, that's what we're calling this. I'm glad we're all. I was really worried that someone would be like,
I was going to say Magus, but whatever.
But you were. Oh.
The awesome party member /
2-1, you're outnumbered.
Magus?
Yeah,
Magus.
You thought what? You thought he was Magus? That's so
You're outnumbered.
He's a mage. Magus.
Yes.
Okay.
You're outnumbered.
Fight me.
I'm not going to fight you.
It's 2-1, bro.
They're like, we have to go find Magus and his demonic army because like they're summoning Lavos, which, plot twist, he is summoning Lavos so we can kill him because he has this crazy story arc where, he's got childhood trauma from this guy that you learn later. So it's so fun to be like, we got to hate this guy. But then as I wish you had guys gotten to that fight.
Oh, I was right there.
You were right there. I know you guys know about it, but
yeah,
the Magus fight in his castle is one of the best boss fights I've ever played in a game. So good. Honestly, that felt like a game where it was supposed to end right after that. And it kept going. It was like, the whole point of the game was like, we got to find this guy, we got to beat him, and we're going to finally defeat this monster. And that could have been the end of the game, but they kept going. Like, he wasn't the end all be all. As badass as this guy was and as good as this fight was, like, there's still more to this story. And like, that felt crazy when I got to that point. Like, the lead up to it, because you're in the castle and you have to like walk up this little hallway or stairs or something to like the scene where you fight him. There's like, it's in complete darkness, and then these little flames flash as you're going by them. Like, the setting is so epic to go fight this guy. The music in that boss fight is so amazing. Like, everything about that boss fight is absolutely incredible. And that's not even the final boss.
Right. It just sets up like how much bigger of a deal Lavos is. Like, the dude lives at the center of the earth. It feels like such a big deal when you get there. Because
then like right after that, not only did like Magus was this big deal and we finally beat him down, and at the point in time, he's like, you guys are stupid. Can you just let me continue what I'm doing? We're like, no, we got to beat your ass. He ends up actually summoning Lavos to try and defeat it. And we're like, no, oh no, oh no. And he's like, I got this. And then he goes, I don't got this. He's too powerful. And that's when Chrono dies. And like, it's not just that he summoned him and we got away from the fight. Chrono dies at this point. That's it. Like, they don't kill main characters off in games, and for that to happen and give you the option to let it stay that way is just ahead of its time almost.
There's so many times when I was playing this game where I'd have a moment thinking about a game that's like way more modern than Chrono Trigger and be like, this game got so much, like Mass Effect 2, like, your Shepard dies, and it's like, Chrono Trigger did this. Like, yo, Magus can actually join your party. Like, I remember in the first Dragon Age, everyone's like, yo, like, Logan can actually... Chrono Trigger did this already. Like, it's crazy how ambitious and just unconventional yet familiar this game feels. Like, it's not I never got lost. There's so much going on, and everything feels so intricate and like purposeful.
It's almost underhanded in a way where it's giving you an option and a choice and you don't know about it. Because I knew going into this that I could have Magus in my party, and like I wanted everybody in my party. Like, I had that prior knowledge, but especially when it came out at the time, like, you didn't know any of that. So when you get to that moment where you fight well, you can fight. You encounter Magus, and Frog is in your party, and he pulls his sword out and was like, you've literally ruined my life. Like, I'm here to kill you. And it has fight or don't fight. And, like, naturally, I'm like, that's Frog's rival, his arch nemesis. Like, I'm gonna try and fight Magus. Like, that's Frog's whole thing. Is like, he killed his mentor. He turned him into a frog. And now he's like, I'm here to kill you. And to not choose the fight just felt so wrong. And I'm like, but I want you in my party. Because you're so important to the rest of the game as well. And it's just... And I didn't know that at first. And I said, oh yeah, let's fight him. And then I realized, like, oh, no. This is the point where I kill him if I fight him. So I had to, like, reset. Because I was like, I made the wrong choice.
Yeah, I can imagine playing this game if all three of us, like, pre-internet age... Like, I did this, I did it. Wait, you did what? You killed him? No, dude, you can jump in your party. Like, just, I can't imagine the craziness of playing this game without any information. Like,
well, it's funny because, like, when I started playing it, I was like, I don't want to use a guide because it's one of the few RPGs where I don't feel like you necessarily need a guide. I never, like, got lost. I would wander around and look for everything because the world was so awesome. But, yeah, things like that. There's things I wish I would have known for sure, but, like, imagine playing that for the first time.
I mean, and that leads into that next point of, like, kind of one thing I want to touch on as far as the value in this game, in the story, is New Game Plus.
Mm-hmm.
Is the fact that this game has such replayability built into this. Not just like, oh, it's fun to just play over and over. Like, this game...
begs you to replay it.
What's the word? This game rewards you for replaying it. And that's the whole purpose of this game, especially with the time traveling mechanic in it as well. But I mean, like, New Game Plus, like, this game coined that. There were a couple games beforehand that used that kind of mechanic where you could load back into it after you beat it with, you know, boosted stats. But, like, this is the first game that called it New Game Plus. So, and everything after that calls it New Game Plus. You go into a game where you can beat the game and then put your character in at the beginning with all your stats. It's called New Game, NGP, or NG Plus, with a little sign. Like, that's what it's called. And that's because of Chrono Trigger. And... people are like, this is an amazing idea. I mean, not only do you go back and play this game again, now knowing, like, oh, I can get Magus? Okay, let me make that decision. Oh, I can play the game without Chrono? Well, let's try that one too. And at any point in the time after you get the time traveling mechanic, you can choose to fight the final boss. You can choose to initiate that. And the idea is, like, you can't do that until you get to New Game Plus because you're so underleveled for this fight. Now, as a reward for beating this game, you go back into New Game Plus and it opens up all these other ending possibilities. And especially for a game that cost $100 when it came out in 1995, like, the replayability of this game was so important and it is designed so exceptionally well that that's why it still holds up today in terms of value of just the story.
It's so crazy. Like, so much things with time travel get clunky, convoluted, messy.
Yep.
This game handles it so gracefully. Even with it like that, they make a mechanic out of it, even like New Game Plus, where it, like, oddly fits and makes sense. It's mind numbing how they were, like, so effortlessly. It seemed, I'm sure it was toils in the office, but as a player, it's like, wow, this is so seamless.
It's pretty cool how New Game Plus fits into the narrative of the story instead of just being like, yeah, load your save. Like, it's story driven that New Game Plus is a thing.
Ryan, I heard you gushing about the gameplay. Do you wanna start us off with it?
Yeah, I mean, specifically just traversal and everything, it's pretty much the same, but gushing over the combat for sure. I'm not a huge Eastern RPG guy, and for me, I was blown away. I mean, there's games in the genre I like, but I mean, the tech system in this is, A, it's cool as hell to, like, execute. B, just watching it unfold. Like, when you have the 3 team members perform a tech attack, it's jaw-dropping every time. And there's so many different combinations you can do. Depending on who's in your squad, you can do 1-person tech, 2-person tech, 3-person techs. And basically, it's to kind of cover how the combat works. There's 2 options, which is pretty cool. You can have your traditional turn-based, let it build up. So they had dynamic.
It's a pretty common thing for RPGs.
Well, see, I don't know shit about them. This is up your territory. But yeah, I thought it was cool because, like, for the active mode, like, you know, you have your traditional, like, Pokemon turn-based, right? Where you can use your items and stuff and then attack. This, it's like they can attack you while you're trying to dig through the menu and get your items and everything.
Right. You'll commonly see this in other ones as wait. So
Okay.
it'll be active or wait. And if you pick wait, once your ATB bar fills up and you get that menu pop up, everything freezes as you make your choices. And a lot of the people who do play RPGs enjoy this because, it's not, I have to react very quickly. They can sit there, sit there and be like, okay, which spell do I want to use? Because sometimes like the menus will be so big that I have to scroll down so far to pick a spell that I've already been attacked twice just because I'm trying to find the stupid spell. So a lot of people like that versatility of being able to pause very briefly to make that decision without being pressured that I need to do it now before I get attacked.
I was going to say something I noticed that was cool with the combat was obviously Brian touched on the tech and all the animations being beautiful for that, but I think it's cool that like the enemies move around while so there's like times where I had to wait. Like I don't want to use Chrono's attack even though my bar's full and wait till they kind of bunch up together and then spin around and knock them all at once. Like it's just added like a extra layer of strategy instead of just like waiting for bars to fill up and using that attack. Like it almost felt tactical in a sense too. It's super unique.
That was a big deal when it came out too. Like we were used to the Final Fantasy formula where you're walking around, a random encounter happens, and then you pop into a different area almost. It's like it sucks you into a different world.
The
battle zone. So it's like, okay, attack this guy and this guy. But now like as you're playing, you learn where they pop out at, and you can be like, I don't want to go that way right now.
There's no random encounters. You can literally walk past them if you can get past them.
It definitely feels random at first because that's the first time you've gone through it. But after you learn it a couple times, like that's the common theme of this is like you learn the game like the back of your hand, and when that bush rustles, the monster's going to come out right there. So and then it doesn't throw you into a new scene, so it feels so much more natural to be like, oh, I'm stopped into a battle exactly where I'm at, and they all move around in that area too. And like Nate said, you can place them strategically in your head. Like I have an attack that will shoot a beam straight forward, and if I line them up, I can hit all three of them. Or just say, forget it, just whack them.
Yeah, I like the Robo's beams.
Yeah, I like the strategy of like, do you wait to execute the tech attack to where they're all bundled up together so you can hit more than one? Or is there one guy's bar's getting ready to fill and do you attack him first? It adds a certain level of strategy and depth to it where the combat doesn't feel overly complex like some of these games are. So it's interesting that it's complex yet easy to figure out. It doesn't hold your hand, but I never once panicked. And I'm not a traditional RPG player, so pretty great just to like be able to pick it up and play it.
Piggybacking on traditional RPGs, the lack of grinding in this game, so refreshing.
I mean, that was the whole game design. They didn't want to grind.
Home run. I love me some RPGs. I'm not opposed to grinding, but I was pleasantly surprised I didn't have to like do any in this game.
Yeah, and that's what's so nice about this. I mean, a lot of people think RPG games like if you don't like grinding, you ain't gonna like RPGs. I'm sorry, I don't like grinding. I've got too much to do. I've got too many games to play. I don't have time to sit here and grind for 6 hours. Sometimes you have to. That's kind of like the formula for an RPG. So for this one, for them to come in and the combat is geared around the items. Like they want you to run around and discover things. And something interesting about the time traveling mechanic is there are chests that you can only open at a certain point in the game. And once you gain that ability, if you open a chest in the past, it is not available in the future. But if you initiate opening it in the past, some of them will say, hey, if you wait, you can get a better item out of this. Do you want to wait? Do you want to open it now? If you wait and you go back to the future to that same chest, the item is evolved into like a better item. So like, for example, like red mail turns into red plate. So instead of it being 25% fire absorption, it is now like 50% fire absorption. And so if you didn't know that going into it, like it takes so many times playing this game figuring that out, where it's like, why is it asking me if I want to wait? No, I want my item. Give me the item. Or there are items where you can break the system and open it in the future first and then go back to the past and the item is still there, and so you get two of them. Yeah. The game it wants you to do that. It wants you to go find those items. It doesn't really care so much about grinding because there's not random encounters. The enemies don't give you that much experience. So the boss fights are all about mitigating, elemental damage and finding out what their mechanics are and what attacks work on this one and what magic spells work on this one. And it's geared for you to think about that instead of being worried about overleveled or underleveled.
And one cool thing to add to that, the characters, with their different attacks and different abilities, it's rewarding to keep swapping them out in and out of the squad because, certain enemies or certain bosses will have those weaknesses. And you never feel like you have to use a certain set of characters, but there's times where it's more beneficial because of like the weaknesses of the bosses to enemies around you, where it's rewarding to get. I mean, I could get an example. Just get a Mass Effect. Like I always had the same 2 characters with me, and this I constantly wanted to experiment, wanted to roll the team around, and see what did what. So it's cool. It's rewarding.
What were you gonna say?
I was going to say this game, as far as gameplay, like, you're playing an RPG, but it feels familiar but fresh. Like that's the experience I had with this whole game, where it didn't feel like it was doing anything like its own genre. This was very a well-made RPG, but it felt so different as I was playing it. There's just little tweaks, little things that made it feel totally unique.
It's so funny to think about people playing this game now, because I obviously didn't play this game when it came out. Wasn't old enough, but I've played it a long time ago, and I've never beat it because my Super Nintendo died. So I never got that opportunity to get to a certain point. But like you guys have never played it. And so now experiencing this kind of game almost 30 years later and saying like this game could come out right now. They're using the same kind of mechanics and designs and gameplay choices as modern games. And that's why it still holds up so well, is because they were so far ahead of their time in design choices and ideas that it still translates today as an exceptionally well RPG. Yeah. It's almost like a time travel in of itself. Like, for someone to sit down and play this game, a 30-year-old game, it's incredible to be like, yeah, this could have came out today with some of these ideas.
I'd even go the far as to say it's timeless.
One thing I did want to bring up was the time traveling mechanic, where it felt natural. Like you traveled to 1000 back to 600, and the world was different. The songs were different. The general hue of it was different. Or if you go into the future, like the world has changed as well. It's not static. It's not like you go into it 600 years in the future or whatever, 10,000 years in the past. It does look different because it's that idea that the continent broke apart as we know of today. But like between 600 and 1000, the castle is still there. The church isn't. There's not something there, and in a different spot there's a house where you go into the future and the house isn't there anymore. Like it feels like a natural progression of time, even though it's the same place. And it benefited from the fact that it didn't use the same music or the same colors or the same just complete layout, where it felt different every time you were jumping time. But you still knew where you were.
Makes the world feel alive. It feels lived in. Even like when you go explore the little villages, it feels lived in. You can walk into someone's house and they're just, doing house stuff. Like it's remarkable.
Nate, what'd you think of the graphics?
They're all-striking. It's one of those things where traditionally this era of games ages better than 3D stuff because it looks clean. I thought the variety was obviously the time travel opens that possibility, but they did such a great job of making everything feel different. Like, okay, the intro alone, like the fair, it's so colorful, it's so grand. Like you're like, I know I'm in for an adventure. Like the moment you start the game, you're like, this is going to be epic, and I hate that word. It's so overused.
Well, it's so iconic now. Like what RPG doesn't use a fair festival as an intro? Like Chrono Trigger set the standard. The game really is jaw dropping. Like it's beautiful, and you can tell. I feel like every pixel has a purpose in this game. I feel like every color is like handpicked. It's really remarkable. I'm gushing over this game, especially the look of it. Yeah, I mean, do you speak of handpicked? Like the sprites were all handmade. Everything in this is handmade.
It's with love. You can tell it's like so lovingly crafted.
Yeah, I saw somewhere that like this game is so big that 4 copies of Final Fantasy IV can fit on one cart of Chrono Trigger.
And that's insane.
And we're talking like, megabytes, which today's standard is super small. But back then, like, this is a huge game. Absolutely huge. And so for them to do handmade pixel art and transitions and all that kind of stuff, just that scene when you first go to Mage's Castle, the Mage's Castle scene where it starts with the branches and then it pans up to the door and then it keeps panning up to the castle and it keeps panning up to the moon. Like just that scene was so cinematic and beautifully rendered. And the sprite animation was phenomenal, even though it was just moving. Like the detail in that was just so, it was so much for 90. I don't know why, like Who thought of that back then?
The scene's very
and
like
executed it.
Castlevania-esque too, where it's like spooky, very sets the mood, it's very ambient, it's like hauntingly beautiful.
I was gonna say this. It's shocking that this is on a Super Nintendo. You can make the argument even if the first time you load the game and the pendulum starts swinging, it looks like a PS1 game.
Everything about this game is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Everything about this game, I'm gonna keep going back to the Mage's Castle. I'm sorry if I keep talking about it, but like that whole set of this game is one of my favorite moments ever.
That blew me away too. Like there's the music for that scene. Like we'll talk about that, but oh my god, like
I'm gonna play it in the transition. But like that is so good. The music is phenomenal. But oh, and Brian had brought this up earlier too, and I'll pass it off to you in a second. But the animation, like the facial animations and the sprites and the monster animations in that graphical area, like keep going on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even just your party members. I remember, like, the first time you encountered in the first area, the little imp dudes rolling on the balls, like, they'll lose their balance every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's like even your mainline enemies and the bosses and just the people walking around the town, the people in the tavern, there's so much variety. And a lot of these games, especially on Super Nintendo or like a cartridge, you're limited on memory. I just get back to, like, how did this fit on a cartridge? So we haven't even talked about the sound yet, but like graphically speaking, like how did this fit on a cartridge?
Well, and I think I had texted one of you guys and was just like, this game is so comical. Like in the writing too, but like I remember there's a scene of the king's aide or whatever he was, but he just the shock and surprise in a pixel art, like their whole body jumps up and their arms stick out and their eyes get all big, and like the animation on the sprites is so expressive that like it is so comical when a joke gets passed off and they react in a very specific way. And it's not like a rinse and repeat same type of animation. Like there's various animation types for these characters that give that facial expression. Because like, you know, we want to talk about Mario where they gave him a hat and a mustache because like they couldn't fit a mouth on there and had to kind of make something that looked like a person, but there's all you can do is jump. Like this took it to the next level in terms of like graphical animation.
Even the attacks, there's literally over 100 different combinations for like the tech attacks. And nothing's reused, recycled. And there's also some really nice effects in this game, like the portal opening. It's almost like semi-polygon.
Yeah, it looks 3D sometimes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's wild. I'm going to say it again. I can't believe it's on a cartridge.
I'm going to piggyback off that. There's times where I was looking at sprites or characters' movement, and it's like, it looks like they built a 3D skeleton and then put like pixel art over it sometimes. It's incredible. And it's one of those things until you see it, you're like, when you see it in motion, it's like, wow. I think Brian kind of hinted at earlier, there's so much character in the way people move. Mm-hmm. It's like there was no dialogue from anybody. They almost have their own little personalities based on their movement, and you still have like a feeling towards them.
And it's not all cut. It's not cut and paste. Where a lot of these games you see human character model here moves this way, moves this way, moves this way, where like the way Chrono ran was different than the way Frog ran because he had to hop. He was a frog.
Right.
Or, you know, Magus doesn't run, he floats. Like he is a mage, so he's gonna float everywhere. Like, and I'm like, yeah, this feels so Dragon Ball right now. Yeah. It's so awesome.
That's the thing.
And like Luca runs differently than Chrono does, and everyone has their own little kind of touch of personality in those graphics.
There's absolutely no palette color swapping models in this at all. Everything's so unique.
When you have something as iconic as Toriyama's art and it's like, hey, make this pixelized, and it still feels like it, that's like insanely impressive. Where it doesn't feel like there's like a step lost in translation. It feels like he like jumped in my Super Nintendo and drew it. It's insane.
Right.
And especially something so iconic and so like as soon as you see it, you know what you're looking at. It's impressive. It's insanely impressive. I don't know if I guess cinematically, but we already kind of touched on that. I feel like you kind of did with the Magus scene, but like
so good.
There's so many moments in this game where cinematically it's like you're almost watching a movie. Like just different camera angles, like the overworld can kind of look cliche in a lot of games, but there's little things in this when you pop in and out, or when you get to a new area of like the camera panning up. It's shocking that I know Brian said it multiple times already, but I can't believe this on a cartridge.
Well, it's so and it's so cool that when you go into the time in between worlds or whatever they had talked about it's isometric.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a up, down, left, right. They had to establish space. And the space that you're in is non-existent. So how do you translate that into a two-dimensional area? It's like, okay, we'll make a platform. All right, well, how do we show it's floating? Like, they changed the angle, made it isometric, and it feels so much different than the rest of the world. So when you leave, it's like, okay, we're definitely back in time. Now we're outside of time. And so for them to utilize that aspect of turning it into like almost like a top-down RPG into an isometric one and still feels the movement is the same is timeless. So sound in this game, majority of all of the tracks were made by Mitsuda, which he was the one who went on to do Xenogears. Like, this was basically his first time making a soundtrack. And at one point in time, he got ill, and Nobuo Uematsu covered for him. He only covered a couple tracks. It wasn't like half of it. It was maybe 4 or 5. I can't remember.
He had 5, yeah.
But majority of this was Mitsuda, and this was like, to compete with Uematsu is incredible. What he did with his first try.
It's insane.
So he was on like the sound team.
Yeah.
And I guess he kind of was just like, I'm going to go make a Multimania. Like, let me compose something, or like, I'm going to move on. Okay. This is your first Holy shit. Like,
yeah, I think he bullied them. It was like, yo, I want to make this so bad. Please do it or I'll leave. And they were like, sure, all right.
And this is your finished product. Like, wow.
Yeah.
I think if I went to a major league game, I was like, hey, let me get a swing. And I hit a home run. You know what I mean?
But yeah, it's reading some of like, I dove a little deeper into like his story, and like, it's incredible, like the effort he put in. He had like multiple times he got hospitalized with stomach ulcers. There's photos of him like falling asleep at his workstation because he's just up all night composing. And like the amount of tracks in this game, I think it's like 60 something.
It's a lot of tracks.
It's insane.
And I don't want to sit here and say that, we're people who, oh yeah, crunch is good. Crunch is not good. Back this time period, like crunch was a thing, especially in this kind of culture as well. It's not a good thing that he had to be hospitalized constantly for the amount of work he put into this. At the same time, I'm not discrediting the fact that he put his heart into it. And I think that's what we're trying to get across.
It's better said than that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he said he put himself into it, and you can tell, and his work shows. It's phenomenal. It's big music people will talk about emotion with music. I think even if you're a casual music listener or appreciator, you hear everything he's trying to convey. And specifically, there's a song like Wind Song where he basically said he wanted to make music that makes you see a picture of a windmill in a field, and you can see the damn thing without seeing it while that song's playing. And it's the intricacy, the layers. There's several songs where they're going for different emotions at different times. It brings a little tear to your eye, some of them, because it's like so well done. And with the limitations of the Super Nintendo, like to make it music this impactful.
What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, we're just going to keep beating dead horse. Like,
as you said before, like, you're really into video game music.
It's iconic. It's remarkable. It's not insane to say it's the best music on Super Nintendo. It's a debatable topic, but it doesn't sound like your typical cartridge music. Again, it sounds like a PS1 game. And the fact that there is that many tracks, and they're not like, 30-second clips. They're long. They're whole songs. Mm-hmm. And it's on a cartridge. It's mind-numbing.
I mean, they really push the limits.
It's things like
this game pushed the limits of the hardware.
It's definitely a hardware pusher. Graphically, sound, like the scope, the size of the game, it's definitely a hardware pusher in every aspect.
Yeah, I think the overall sound, like with the combat, movement, stuff like that, it's all great too. But I think the music is just so a bar above everything else, any of its competition. You said Super Nintendo. I'm thinking like all-time great video game soundtracks. Like if you're like, this is the best one ever, I'm not going to argue with you.
I mean, here's the thing though. Like in my opinion, you cannot be called the greatest RPG of all time and have a subpar soundtrack.
Yeah, it's a huge part of it.
Especially with a game series or genre that's so heavy into storytelling and mood setting. Like you have to be able to use every single tool to your advantage. And if you cannot pull off soundtrack music in an RPG, like I'm sorry. Find a better composer. And they didn't need to find one. Like they had one on deck and didn't know it, and like polish that gem. He's heralded as a great because of this game. Went on to do great work.
Like what a cool story. Like, seriously, like just like having the confidence in himself to be like, yeah, I can make one of the most timeless soundtracks of all time.
And I'll give this guy credit because he did have to, tag out. And Uematsu had to come in and compose a couple things. But the fact of the matter is, even today, people still talk about Mitsuda before they talk about Nobuo Uematsu being a part of this. Like, that says a lot about the work he put out, is people want to talk about his work in the game.
Like, what a dream team.
Yeah.
Proof's in the pudding. Like, go listen to it. You can't on Spotify, unfortunately, but go YouTube it. It's incredible.
Mage's Battle is the best soundtrack of all of it. So good.
I think the opening theme, if that doesn't hook you instantly, like, you probably need to get your ears checked because it's beautiful.
Or even like the battle music, like you know, a lot of these games you're just like, oh, here's the same battle music. I never got like frustrated with it.
It sounds so classically 90s too,
Yeah.
but it doesn't feel dated.
Shit bangs.
I think there's a great variety in it too. It doesn't all sound like it's trying to sound the same, and especially in a game with time travel being a component, I think it's so charming how well he pulled it off. And man, I felt so many emotions with the soundtrack in this game. It really carried the story too. It's just as important as the characters. Barry kind of touched on how important music is in RPGs, and this one especially like got me in the feels a lot. Like, been having some stuff outside of this game podcast being a little tough lately, and this game was like a great palette to like just put me in moods of like, man, this is awesome, or damn, or like all sorts of the spectrum. And it was like exactly what I need in my life right now. It was great.
Well, and I know you guys know exactly what I'm talking about when you play a game with a phenomenal soundtrack and you go back to it years later and like that song hits and it puts you in that time, right? In a certain moment. Like whenever I listen to a Final Fantasy VIII battle music, like I remember very vividly certain scenes in that game that just stuck with me. Like there's a very specific point where in one of my playthroughs in Final Fantasy VIII, I had Quistis summon a specific summon, and I remember seeing everything happen in my head as that song plays, and like that bout of nostalgia kind of hits me. And in this one, is nostalgia, like there shouldn't be nostalgia there, but it feels the same and it hits the same. And like when I go listen to certain music in this soundtrack outside of the game, it puts me right back there, and it puts me right in a moment that I remember immediately.
I'm absolutely going to have that effect with this game now. Like for me, it's always go back to Morrowind's soundtrack. I remember getting off the boat, being in City Anine the first time. Like I think this game's going to have very similar memories of just like super powerful moments. Like one of the best overall soundtracks of all time. I'm not afraid to say it.
It's weird because like there's so much to say about it, and I've got so many positive things to say, but it's like I'm not going to say you're going to beat a dead horse. Like I can just say this is literally one of the best soundtracks of all time, and like go listen to it if you don't believe us. It's like literally all I can say about it.
So as far as price and collectability goes, currently the Super Nintendo version of this game is about a $200 to $250 cart. Seems it might have gone up a smidge. If you want a nice, not dirty, not yellowed, great looking label, you're probably looking at more like $300 just for the cart. Now, complete in box, so we got the box, the tray, the game, and the manual in a pretty decent shape. You're looking at about $800. And then it goes further than that. So it's starting to push over $1,000 if you have all the inserts, which includes like the ads. There is a game-specific registration card that goes to this, and there are 2 posters. So the posters alone go for about $200, which I don't have the posters, and I'm half tempted. I'm actually more than half tempted to buy them to just complete mine. In 2014, so 8 years ago,
The good old days.
it was about $200 to $300 complete.
Ouch.
Cart price. And obviously the big boom of pre, post, and current COVID or whatnot, like it's shot game prices up. So that's where we're looking at this. I don't see this really ever going down. To me, this price is so high, and there's a DS port. And the thing about it is like the DS port is a great port. It is as close to the Super Nintendo version you're going to get. The phone version and the PC version are vastly hated. They're horrible. They're bad. Brian can probably speak from experience.
Say you want to talk about that mobile port, I can just give a quick little taste with it. So this is the first time I played this game, was borrowing Barry's copy to talk about on this podcast. And I was instantly like, I want this game. I love this game. I need it. And there's a local game store and it has a loose cart copy for $300. It's beat up. I'm not interested.
I've seen it. It's pretty nasty.
Yeah.
It's yellow and brown.
It looks like somebody smoke too many
I'll
cigarettes
just go ahead
around
and say
it.
it. I love this game so much that like my next big purchase is going to be a complete box Chrono Trigger on Super Nintendo.
Oof.
So it's like I know I'm not to buy, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But for now, I was like, I want to play this game again. Like I'll buy this mobile port because I don't have the DS version either. Hot garbage. I mean, it's like so use like it's touchpad. So use a virtual stick to walk around. Go to like dodging some of these enemies. Like it takes some of the strategy away from it because the controls are so bad. Or even trying to pick something up.
No controller support.
You just tap it, but it doesn't work half the time.
I would be curious because people say the PC port is bad. Obviously, the phone one is hated even more. I'd be curious to see how bad the PC port is.
PC, yeah.
I'll bite the bullet. I'll buy it for $10 on Steam or whatever it is.
And I'm the first thing you see is they've completely changed the menu style, and it just I don't like how it
like
looks.
selecting attacks and picking enemies you want to attack. I was like, here, Barry, mess with this for a minute. And you're like, what's going on? I'm like, yeah, exactly, right?
Like they basically took Chrono Trigger and put a modern overlay onto it as far as the menus, and I don't like how it looks. Like that's
for modernizing it
it's
definitely
icky.
plays worse. It looks fine. It just plays like hot garbage. I would say don't pick up the mobile port. The mobile port is not worth it.
I'm gonna look this up real quick, but I'm wondering if the DS is digital.
Oh, that would be a very nice alternative. I'm just going to say it too. Like, I've never played the DS version, but what I've seen of it and a little bit I've researched, it seems like that might be an alternative for some people who want to play this game in a way that actually runs correctly for a cheaper price point. That's the thing, though. Is it like touch controls also?
No, it's got buttons.
It's good.
I mean, the bottom is the touch control, and it's mostly menu options. So I think you can touch it to attack or use items or go through your menu and do stuff.
Well, you can use a stylus too, so you can actually like register.
But it's not like you're touching to move your character around.
Right.
You're using the D-pad.
Good.
It seems like Chrono Trigger is not on the DS shop. It's looking like the PS1 version is. Which honestly is probably a better choice. It's better option than PC and Android.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you've got FMVs in it, which are cool, but
slick.
the load times are awful. Absolutely awful.
I was watching some YouTube videos of FMVs. I'm like, this looks awesome.
Now, I will say, I'm curious if the digital version of the PS1 copy is going to be faster.
Should be.
In theory, it should be.
On like a PS, like a PS TV.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's going to be faster.
It's gotta be.
Should
You'd
be.
think it would be. I would have to do some more research into that
because I've heard it's like Symphony of the Night bad, like where it's like loading and it's like I gotta
Ouch.
go. Yeah, I've heard it's like rough.
I would rather buy the digital PlayStation 1 version than the PC port because the menu is so fucking awful.
If it's like this mobile one, that's a very good argument to make.
And
it's trash. I regret my $10 purchase.
It's one of those things where we keep talking about how easy it is to mod a DS, Chrono Trigger.
That's true. I mean, honestly, like, you want to emulate this game, slap it on the DS emulation. The DS copy right now is about $100 complete, which is a very, very reasonable price. 2014, it was about $40. So
Jesus.
That's the last time I saw it.
I mean, I bought mine for $25.
I don't see it very often. Out and about.
So it's one of those games that was subjected to the whole COVID crisis of nostalgia, and it's stayed there. Honestly, I'm not surprised, or I am surprised it's not more.
Honestly, I am too. Especially with like the 3DS hot topic right now of it.
Yes, like it's not on the digital eShop. It's an $800 Super Nintendo game. The ports are notably bad. They just released the Chrono Cross remaster, and we still didn't get any news about Chrono Trigger being ported yet again. Like, I'm pretty sure Square Enix thinks that we're all happy with this PC port, and that's how they're going to keep it.
Isn't it such a weird thing that such a beloved franchise that, like, I don't know anybody who's ever said a negative thing ever about Chrono Trigger. These are our only options to play this.
Yes.
It's crazy. It's
why isn't this on Switch?
Right.
It's disrespectful.
Or like the fact that it never even got a true sequel.
Why isn't it on a Super Nintendo Classic?
I don't think it needs a true sequel.
I agree. I'm in that same boat where there's certain things that don't need. There doesn't need to be 7 Rocky movies. Rocky 1's amazing.
I mean, a game with 13 endings. Like, how are you going to justify your sequel?
This is the same argument where it doesn't need a sequel. But I mean, God, look at Final Fantasy. Square of all companies, you think they'd be like, you know what? Let's get a Chrono Trigger sequel. And all the creators have said they're down for it too, which is really interesting.
That is surprising to me because this game was clearly like a labor to make.
This is a big love child.
And that's the thing. Like, we were talking about people going to the hospital while they were creating this, but like they were making something they truly loved. and it shows through this game.
And we're at the point in time where, like, if they're not going to do one soon, they're not going to do one at all, because some of these guys are getting old.
Yes.
They're getting very old. I mean, Umatsu just retired, or he's about to. So we're not going to have any music back from him to potentially come back. I mean, Kitase is, like, still doing a lot of stuff, right? Like, he's really big into the company, right? I think he's a vice president or something. Like, he's a chairman board. He's on the board of Final Fantasy. He's, like, the guy that's making sure Final Fantasy is staying in continuity, or, like, the themes are being consistent. So he is very invested in his work. Sakaguchi is out here playing Final Fantasy 14 just for the funsies, and he's, like, not concerned about making games. Like, he loves playing games. But he said, like, yeah, I'll come back for some things. I want to play games. I want to finish them before I go start projects. Like, he's not retired in that sense. He still wants to do stuff. So the team is still here. But sorry, modern day is not going to let all these guys work together again.
That's the thing. They'd have to start their own studio.
They'd have to be independent.
It makes me wonder if that has anything to do with the price point of this game, too. Like, consensus being that we're not going to get another one. I think it's going to keep this game high. It's a factor, at least.
I mean, I don't think we ever will get a sequel to this game. We did-ish. It was Chrono Cross and ish. People are still like, this isn't a sequel. This isn't what we wanted. I mean, it's its own game in its own right, and you love it for its own reasons. So I try to view them as two totally separate things. But we're never going to get a true Chrono Trigger sequel. And at this point, it's honestly hard to debate if we're even going to get a good port. Even though Square and Enix combined, I don't understand what's happening with the IP as far as, like, license. Like, what are they why? I mean, Square Enix has this problem. They think everybody's happy with these PC ports. They totally screwed us over on the Final Fantasy Pixel ports and thought it was still okay. So, like, I think that's why this game is sitting up. Like, we don't really have hope for them to treat it well. People want the great, like, they want it on Super. It's the best way to play it.
I would say the best way to play it's the original release. Let that sink in for a minute.
So, and let's not talk about the fact that this is a Super Nintendo game. This is a cardboard box.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, I mean, if we want to go straight into a lot of the reasons on why this is pricey, like, it's cardboard box, subject to damage. The booklet's subject to damage because you have to try and cram them in there with that tray, and you always bend in the corners. The posters, like, people be putting the posters up, especially Dragon Ball fans at that time period. Like, I want that Akira Toriyama art up on my wall. Who's going to keep that poster and not put some holes in it?
I think finding one with the registration card, pretty wild to have the dedicated registration card.
Dedicated registration card. Not only the physical aspects of this game on why it's kind of hard to get because it may have been damaged or used, or, you know, classically Super Nintendo. That's what happens with all those games. But now you've got the names behind it. You've got the prestige behind it. You've got this incredible pedigree behind it in terms of who's creating it.
I think you hit the nail on the head to start of this episode. There's never going to be another game like this. I think
absolutely not.
Absolutely has to do with the price too. I think people know that.
It's such an icon. It's an unsaid but said iconic part of game history.
Oh yeah,
it's a huge deal. It's almost under the radar sometimes because if you go up to somebody now in modern day and age and you say Chrono Trigger, it's one of those things that's starting to fall off in terms of, like, notoriety.
Again, that piggybacks off what you said. Like the treatment this game's got post Super Nintendo has been pretty disrespectful. Other than the DS port, I won't bash it, but there's people younger than us that, like, hopefully they played it on DS, or else they're playing it in a mobile or PC version. So it's Steam hasn't been carried over into the future. I think this game has so much going for it from a collectability standpoint. I mean, the box alone, you see that iconic art, you're like, I gotta pick this up. If you know what it is, if you know his work.
Absolutely. I mean, and that was one thing I did want to touch on is, like, the artist of this is the artist of Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball, like, in the 90s and the early 2000s, like, it was a joke to enjoy anime, especially in the West. Like, if you were an anime fan in the West, like, you hid that.
Yeah, I got less crap for being a comic collecting nerd than the anime kids did. Like
I remember being, you know, when I was in school, we made an anime club, and that was one of the most, like, okay, we're putting ourselves out there. This is a struggle, and a lot of the stuff that we had gotten because of that was a little, it was rough.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's how anime was treated, and now it's so commonplace. I mean, basically, if you ain't an anime fan, what are you doing with your life? Everybody knows Dragon Ball. Everybody's watched some kind of anime.
I think Toonami, man.
Like, you have watched Hellsing. You have watched Full Metal Alchemist. Like, everybody, even if you're not a huge anime fan, has watched some kind of anime and enjoyed it. And that's not how it used to be. So,
no. Yeah, it's It's like the huge part of why, especially our age group, like knows of it. I'm pretty sure Dragon Ball is most people's gateway to that art style and just the genre in general.
Yeah, and he's still doing works for Dragon Quest. Right. But I'm like, I'm sorry, Akira Toriyama drawing a cool ass
guns
frog as a knight, like that's awesome.
Yeah.
So a lot of people like me who grew up with Dragon Ball in that time period, and that's like one of the artists that brought me into the fold. Like, I want it. It's a big nostalgia point for me.
It's kind of a point you said earlier where this game isn't like super rare. I've seen far less Chrono Triggers for sale than like Earthbounds, which everyone wants to freak out over all the time. Like, I don't see Chrono Triggers for sale a lot, and I think you said it earlier, people don't want to get rid of them.
I have seen more Earthbounds.
Way more.
But Chrono Trigger is one of those games that, like, once you buy it, like, you're gonna die with it probably.
Yeah, rightfully so too. And I've seen, let's say, I'll conservatively guess 2 out of 3 Chrono Triggers I've actually seen are counterfeit. I feel like it's super counterfeited. So to find like an authentic one, if you just Google like, hey, how do I spot between a counterfeit and a fake one or a real one? There's so many articles and so many. It's like it's got to be one of the most counterfeited Super Nintendo games, right?
I mean, it's one of those games where you go on an eBay listing and they're cracking that case open and showing you the board because it's so commonplace. Yep. So it's not there's somewhere it's not a question on whether it's going to be authentic or not, but you open up something like Super
just to
Bowling,
play it,
you better show that board.
What do you think like the counterfeit ones go for on average? Because like I'm not afraid to say it. That'd be a damn near better alternative than playing this piece of shit mobile version.
Cheap. But why would you spend money when you can just emulate it on your DS?
Thing. Yeah, that's true. I like playing.
Or you can just say, "Hey Barry, can I borrow the DS one until I buy my?"
Yeah.
I low-key might have to do that after this episode because
that's fine.
I tried to get pretty far into this game. I played it at a pretty breakneck pace, and I still don't feel like I barely scratched the surface. I'm completely enamored with this game. We'll get into that when it's is it worth it, but this game was truly captivating for me.
So, I mean, the ultimate question of, is this game worth it? Like, $300 cart, $800 complete, $1,000 complete plus. And by plus, I mean with posters and registration card and whatnot. Is the game worth that value, all things considered? There is a DS port, there are PC ports, there is a PS1 copy. There are other accessible ways to play this game. So, is the Super Nintendo game worth that much money? Brian, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start it off. I mean, I think I told you when I was playing your copy, I was like, I want this game. Like, I'm not a huge RPG guy, so like unequivocally, absolutely worth it. As far as like monetary value, it's sky's the limit. We just talked about that. Yeah, the alternatives are not great. I think the DS is a good option. But like I said, I just wanted to play it again so bad. I went out and bought the mobile port and paying for it. Like, you get what you pay out of this game, and I think there's a certain aspect of I like having the cartridge. I want that on my wall. I want a complete in-box copy of this game, and it's like I'm going to pay for it. I know I'm going to pay for it, but it's going to be my next big purchase. I guarantee you. Absolutely worth it.
You know, what's an interesting thing to think about is maybe they know how much people want this game, and they'll settle for a crappy PC port. That's how they make their money. Why would they invest the money in supporting it again when people are already buying it because they know they can't afford $800?
So dirtball.
That's dirtball. I'm not saying I believe it and it's true, but it's definitely something to consider.
Because like I'm super casual in RPGs, and like I was enamored with this. I was blown away. All my expectations were. I've heard how great this game is, and I'm like, okay, RPG people are, every RPG is great. No, this is 10 out of 10. No questions asked. This is the best Super Nintendo game I've ever played, and it's not even my genre of game that I'm going to go to. Absolutely worth it, and yeah, I guarantee you, it's going to be my next big purchase. And it sucks because I like finding games out in the wild, like in person, but like I know to get the one I want, I'm going to pay for it online. It's going to suck, but I'm going to do it.
Nate?
Very similar thoughts, except I do love RPGs, and this is probably... I might fuck around and say this is the best 2D RPG I've ever played.
It's always between that and Final Fantasy VI.
I think you guys know how much I'm into Phantasy Star 4. And how that game had a similar way where it kind of came out of nowhere in my life and like just totally took me by the horns and captivated me. It's like I'm champion of Phantasy Star 4. This game's right up there with it, if not better. I'm already going to go ahead and say this is my favorite Super Nintendo game I've ever played. Obviously Genesis over Super Nintendo, but there's all-time greats on Super Nintendo, and this is like in a category of its own. Like I think literally we've said it earlier. This game came out on PS5, Series X, and Switch tomorrow. Like this would already be heralded as one of the greatest games ever made. It's shocking. I had a very high bar set for me. 'Cause, it's like when a big movie comes out, everyone's like, it's great, it's great, it's great. And you go see it and you're like, it was good, but y'all need to chill out. Nope. You guys haven't hyped this game enough. Like it was, you can sit and listen to this whole podcast about how great it is. It'll exceed your expectations. I think it's worth every dollar.
And that's funny to bring up too, because when I listen to podcasts all the time, people are talking about, this is my favorite game of all time. This is the best game ever played. I'm sitting there like, I've played it. I had to disagree. This one I can't disagree. Like and I'm curious on both of you if this is kind of beside the point, but like this is easily a top 5 game for me, and the only reason it's not number 1 is because I don't have the same nostalgia as I do for my number 1.
Exactly. I wonder if if I played this game when I was a kid, it would have to be so high up.
Yeah.
Like the fact that I'm at this point in my life grown as shit and just now experiencing this game and finding it, like this game's going to stick with me. This game has always been on my radar because of what it is. There's a mystique around this game. Now that I've experienced it, spent time with it, we've discussed it. Like I have to own this game. It is very high up on my next purchases for sure.
Well, it's an unsung hero.
I mean, against Brian.
Think about how much merchandise there is out for Chrono Trigger. There's nothing.
Right,
there's fan-made stuff, but like as far as being a great on a Super Nintendo, which is a console that everybody had, it wasn't like, oh, some people had a Dreamcast. It wasn't very popular. Super popular console, super popular company, height of their careers, big game. Where's the merchandise? Square, you guys just re-released stuff for Final Fantasy IX and
criminal.
Vagrant Story. So like, where's my frog figures?
It's criminal.
Where's my Bring Arts?
I would buy all of it, honestly.
Where's my Bring Arts Magus? I would get the whole line.
It's crazy.
It
goes back in the conversation like, there's no sequel. Okay, if you're not going to give us a sequel, give us merchandise, right? I mean, y'all like money.
Give me the chrono, like an official chrono clock.
I would buy, come
on.
I'd buy all of it.
Well, there might be one. It might be an old one. I don't know. As far as I'm aware, there's not official merchandise
even like
for this.
The anime, it's never officially been released.
Yeah, but 100% worth it. It's very, very high up on my like next big boy purchase. Like Chrono Trigger is very high up there, if not on the top. Not just RPGs, but games in general. This is one of the finest games I've ever played. This will be one of the finest games I will ever play. I don't think I have the words to adequately express how amazing of an experience this game truly was.
Yeah, I mean, if I already didn't own this game, it would still be my number 1 game I would want. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have it with the price of $0 that I have it for. So, I mean, this game was gifted to me. I originally had a cart by itself, and that's how I'd played it on the Super Nintendo, and it died. And very, very early on in my relationship with my significant other, I had mentioned, like, I wanted this game offhandedly, and next thing you know, I got it for Christmas, and was like, yeah, I knew a dude that sold it to me for $40. And I'm like, what? Shocking. And that was, I don't know, 5 years ago. And last Christmas, I said, hey, I want a manual to complete it. And I got the manual for Christmas, too. So, like, I don't have any money in this game. But I would still, if I didn't have it, I'd be like, I better start saving. I'm saving $800 because I want this game. And, like, to me, a complete copy is a box, the game, and the manual. I don't need all of the extra stuff. But I will be buying the extra stuff for this game. I want the posters that went inside of it. And I want the registration card that went inside of it. I want those things. I don't have them, and I'm going to be compiling them to put them inside of there because this game is worth it to me as an Akira Toriyama lover, as a Sakaguchi lover, as a Kitase lover, as a Square and Enix lover. I not so much in a Dragon Quest, so I don't complete the trifecta here, but
it's also like really surprising for you since
it's so slow. Maybe I haven't played the right one yet. But I mean, this game drips nostalgia for me that I never had. Like, it's so crazy to think about a game that I never owned that I have nostalgia for, and that's why I wanted it. And I have it.
I'm upset at myself that it took me this long to play this.
Same.
But again, maybe I'm sleeping on RPGs, man.
Yeah.
I mean, tossing around that idea of value. I mean, the further we go in this, the more I have to really think about, like, is something really worth that much money? I mean, to me, there's not a lot out there that's worth more than it came out for.
Yeah.
Like MSRP, money's a kind of a hard thing to come by for some people, and there's a lot of stuff where you look at it and it's like, can I justify $200 for a video game? Now I have to think about it a little differently and a little more critically, where it's like, all right, take all things considered in this game as a collectible and not just...
I think however you collect, whatever your reasons are, I think this game's definitely worth it. If you're going for pure monetary investment, I think this game's going to keep growing. I think if you're going for, I want every Squaresoft game, if I want...
I mean, for a JRPG fan, this is a necessity.
It's the game. It's the game, I think.
I mean, this was my grail.
Yeah.
I have a wish list of games, and I don't really have one that's like a grail as much as this one was. And this is a lot of people's grails, especially for JRPG fans.
And I can see why.
I've got a couple others now where I'm like, crap, I better buy these now.
So I have a question, Barry.
Yeah.
If you didn't own this and knowing the going rate for this now, if you were able to, would you pull the trigger?
I said, yeah. I said I'd be better starting to save some money, but like, yeah. This is one of those things where like I wouldn't be able to afford it in one push. I would have to kind of siphon away some money. Like, I'll be transparent. Like, I'm not a big baller over here. I ain't got no crazy big boy job that can just throw $800 down on a whim. So I have to sit here and kind of save for some things, as, you know.
Well, I think piecing this game together, too, is not a horrible idea.
I wouldn't suggest it. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it's tough, but I mean, like, something that costs this much, it's not like, you know, for Jack Bros, like, I'm not going to find
it's going to cost you more splitting it up.
You can find this, though, at least.
It's going to cost you a lot more splitting it up. I've looked into it. I'm currently trying to find just a box for Final Fantasy III. I have a beat up manual and a map that my friend gave me from her childhood, and like I love it, and I'm never gonna buy a replacement for it because it means something to me. So I just need a box, and like trying to find that in a condition that's decent, that's basically not the same price as it complete. It's impossible.
In the olden days, it was easier to Frankenstein games, and nowadays people know like, well, all they need is that box. I'm gonna mark this up.
They just get it. They split everything up.
Yep. You can see listings on eBay of people that have a game, and you can see the same seller with the manual, the box, like heart, and it's gonna cost more to Frankenstein stuff. Like, unfortunately, back in the day, it was easier to Frankenstein stuff. Now, you're paying that premium because they know that's the last thing you need, and you're gonna do it.
I mean, there's some people that do that on purpose, and you can tell by their prices, and there are some people who that's all they got, so they're just going to go ahead and throw it up there for a price. I mean, people buying items that are not complete is not very common right now, so I think I spoke about it at some point in time, but I will, like for DS games, I will buy them without the game for a good price. If I can see it and look at it and add and calculate, like, all right, I can piece this together, sure, but like, there's especially Super Nintendo, I would not suggest that at this point. Brian, I would say if you already had a piece of it, I'd say do it that way.
Yeah.
But, you know.
So I'm almost on the fence whether you can find the cart. I'm almost on the fence whether just buy the cart and then get the rest later, or just sit there and not eat for a couple days, weeks.
I mean, well, okay, you got to think like the cart's $300, the posters are $200.
That's the thing. I haven't bought a game online, and I don't think I'd want to buy something of this magnitude online. But like, where else am I going to find it? That's what sucks.
Yeah.
I hate modern collecting.
It would have to be a tip off at a local store in another state where you're following them on social media, and you'd have to get to it before somebody else did, which is impossible.
Yeah, God.
So I mean, that's kind of the format that we're in. Is you have to justify those online prices and hope you're biting it at a good point before they double and go to 2,000 or something stupid.
And this on a good note.
A quick point I want to mention is what a palate cleanser. Like, this is the first, like, absolute great game we've played in a while. Because we did Rule Rose. I'm
not going to toot my own horn or anything, but I think the choices that I've set out so far are the most enjoyable.
Yeah.
I'm just wanted to be thankful that we get to play something of quality.
All in all, it sounds like Chrono Trigger is very much worth it to all of us. In any form and really any capacity. Especially the Super Nintendo. Super Nintendo, highly suggested. DS, if you just want to play the game and you can't afford a collector item as far as Super Nintendo goes, don't buy the PC. Just don't do it. Don't buy mobile's probably worse, so don't do it.
Definitely don't buy mobile.
Mobile's not worth it. Collecti-Bros, stamp, disapproved. So the consensus of this game is we all absolutely love Chrono Trigger. We all want to own it. We want to know what you guys think about it. Is this actually the greatest RPG of all time? Do you disagree with that? I would love to hear your thoughts. Or whether this is a game that you want to buy. Or if this is a game that you're like, nah, I don't want to buy this. Anything and everything. Give me the hot takes. Give me the low-key thoughts. Drop me a note in the DMs. In the tweets. We're going to be on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. At Collecti-Bros Pod. Alright, Nate, you're hosting the next episode. And give us an introduction into what's coming next.
Yeah, the next episode, we're picking two consoles that we we'll have to collect for and going in depth on that of why we collected it and what's so special about it and why we gravitate towards it. So make sure you check that one out.
Tune in next time on the Collecti-Bros podcast. Favorite consoles to collect for, hosted by Nate.
That's me.
Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Collecti-Bros out. Marry, fuck, kill, Dragon Ball. Go, Brian.
Oh, okay.
It was on the schedule. Should have
Mary
thought
and
about it.
Bulma.
All right.
Easy choice. Fucking, sorry, Krillin. Is it Android 19, 17?
18.
18. Hey. Been a while. Killing. Oh, fucking. Fuck, what's his name? The little fucking.
Chaozu?
Yep, fuck him. Die. Oh, wait. Already dead. Don't have to
You're
worry
killing
about it.
Chaozu?
Bye.
Oh, I gotta get back from this microphone.
It's his death scene.
I mean, it's not my favorite,
It's
but
supposed to be like,
damn,
oh,
man.
it's so touching. I'm just like,
Brutal.
I love you, Yamcha.
It's TN.
Been a while.
TN, I'm sorry. He blows
Guess
up,
what?
self-destructs.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, totally ineffective.
Waste of life.
Oof.
Yeah.
All right, you're marrying Bulma, you're fucking Android 18, and you're killing Chaozu.
Yep.
Yeah, man. All right. Nate, what you got?
Marrying Bulma. Sorry to piggyback, but yeah. Fucking's tough. There's options in Dragon Ball. I'm gonna go Chi-Chi.
No.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It's all
Chi-Chi.
Yeah. And killing, that's like the hardest one for me, honestly, but I'm gonna go Yamcha because he's probably used to it.
Damn.
He'll be alright. He'll come back. He's used to it. Well, everyone will be like, okay, that happened again. How about you?
All right. So we marrying Bulma. I don't want to be cliche, but like,
Come on.
Bulma is the best thing about this series. Better marry her. She's smart. She'll put you in your place. Vegeta made a great choice.
Absolutely.
And Bulma stomps all over that man when she needs to. She ain't take no shit from Vegeta. So Bulma is the correct choice. Super smart. Makes cool inventions.
Wife material.
Oh, super wife material.
Pro-wife. Pro-wife.
Super wife. I wanted to go a little wild, a little weird. So we gonna be fucking Cell.
Oh, I knew you were gonna say that for some reason. I knew you were gonna say that.
Which version?
I don't. Not second version.
One with the fucking tail.
I was thinking one.
Why did I know you were gonna say Cell for some reason?
I don't know.
Like, what the-
I mean, the Saiyans are just all people. Like, give me an alien, and I hate Frieza. Frieza's
I almost
annoying. I
said
like
that
Cell
just
better.
just for the wild night of like the English dub like voice.
Oh,
Like, can you imagine that in bed?
Harder, louder.
This is awful.
God. I like Cell. Cell's a good choice.
He's over there dying.
Fucking hilarious.
Fucking Cell, bro.
Oh God. When he kills the civilians, when he like hits them with the tail and they get in the little.
He like sucks them up through his tail like a little straw, and it like looks like a little. I don't even know how to describe it. God, it's so comically good. Cell can suck me up with that tail.
Who are you killing?
Not because I think he's hot, but maybe it's a little kinky. I don't know.
Only one way to find out.
I'm broken. Who are you killing?
That one, I didn't get that far. I like knew the fuck right off the bat, but like, I'm gonna kill Majin Buu. I actually hate him the most.
I know you hated Boo, yeah.
No, just Majin Buu. I'm okay with Super Buu,
Super Boo's cool.
Ken Buu, but Majin Buu. Oh, the candy thing is so stupid. It turns everybody into chocolate bars. I'm like, this is so dumb. Your design is stupid. I hate you and your voice. And it's so funny seeing who the voice actor is for Boo. It's hilarious. Dude looks like David Draymond making the voice of Majin Buu. It's so funny. But like, I hate the character. So, and I hate the fact that they like took him and tried to make him into a good character. I'm like, you're annoying. Just kill him. Bye. Kill him. Oh, I could have fucked Beerus, though. That would have been a good one, too.
Meow.
I already stuck with Cell, though.
You already had
Stuck.
Yeah. That's it. Oh my god.